Hey everyone, welcome to Hardpoints, the podcast about energy security and the startup economy, how they intersect to shape the world around you. We unpack the real dynamics behind the headlines, what's changing, what it means, and why it matters to you. Thanks for being here. Neal, how's the week been treating you, man?
Yeah, man, still glued to the TV. The Iran conflict has just consumed me. So, there's good and bads to that. Are you still avoiding the news?
I'm trying to be a little bit more thoughtful about it rather than just like being glued to it, but like digest it in meaningful pieces. Which is to say, I'm still mostly avoiding it, I think.
Well, you got enough other things to distract you, that's for sure. And I guess, I'm glued to the TV, but, my day job keeps me busy enough. I'm not actually watching it all day, but, I get home and it's on.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of hard to avoid right now. I guess it, successfully distracted everybody from the Epstein files. So it's at least achieving one of its outcomes. But
wag the dog, man.
Yeah, and what was that movie? That was in the 90s, I think.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to go back and watch that. Maybe I'll do that. Well, I've got a flight tomorrow, so maybe I'll watch that on the flight.
Good reminder of all the tricks. Yeah, it's just hard again because it's personal. I mean, we've flown the airplanes that are being flown overseas in that part of the world doing mission that's so similar. It's just hard not for me. It's hard not to just want to know that our brothers and sisters in arms are okay, and that we're prosecuting the mission successfully to whatever that means. I mean, the broader political is its own thing, but for me, it's just how are our servicemen and women doing? And yeah, I mean, just fingers crossed, man. Like they're doing a good job, and there's been that friendly fire incident. We've had several troops killed already, but it's hard not to be watching every second.
But I'll give you the optimistic view on that friendly fire incident.
Okay.
So thankfully nobody was hurt in that event, but we did lose the loss of 3 F-15s. But do you know what took those 3 F-15s down?
I just assumed it was like Patriots or something. I don't know.
Nope, it was an F/A-18, a Kuwaiti Air Force F/A-18. So,
holy shit!
Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah, so there you go. The F/A-18 is the only jet to shoot down an F-15 in history. So there you go.
Oh man, bragging rights forever.
For those unaware, like the F-15 community loves to talk about the air-to-air, kill capacity of the F-15 that's never lost. It's mostly like the F-15 like taking credit for the Israeli Air Force doing shoot downs. But it is still fun for the F-18 community now to take some credit for shooting down F-15s, which I can only laugh about because nobody was actually hurt.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, I did not know that. That's fascinating. I need to. All right, so a couple of things to say about that. I've got buddies that after their service went to go train the Kuwaiti Air Force. Super interesting. I'm gonna have to catch up with them because maybe the Kuwaiti Air Force can't be that big. Maybe there's some.
They've got to know those.
Maybe
people
there's some good stuff. Yeah, for sure. The other thing is, I'll say this about the Eagles. I have gone up against them in BVR, beyond visual range fights, and also sort of BFM, basic fighter maneuvering, like the close-in dogfighting stuff. And I will say on the first part, I got my ass kicked because they have a bigger radar and they train to it all the time. And it was just not pretty. Like they were just a lot better than us.
Yep.
And I don't say that with any, that's just a fact. They were just better. But then in the BFM stuff, the Hornet was just so much more capable, and the Eagle was basically like shooting a barn door. It was like I fought against a lot of other F-18s, F-16s, F-5s, like just other small nimble fighters, and the Eagle was just a big fucking barn door. It was just so easy to shoot. And like the goal in BFM is always to get like a gun kill, and like And it happens from time to time, but it's not every dogfight you get a gun kill on a Hornet. Like, it's somewhat rare, but it was just a lot of gun time like, I got to do it a few times. And it's just every time it's just like so easy to shoot.
Oh, they get mad about it too. They get real mad. My squadron did just before I showed up, they did a det down to Kadena to fight some Air Force F-15 squadrons deployed there.
Yeah.
And so during exactly that same sort of scenario where, like, at distance, big, powerful radars, they're air-to-air specialists, like, they kind of beat up on us, but they hated it in the visual arena because my squadron just beat up on them, like a fucking rented mule. So it was to the point where we had to, like, our squadron, in order to make it a little bit more fair, it had to be like a 2-to-1 missile, and we weren't allowed to use off-bore sight missiles, and so we were
one hand behind your back, huh?
Yeah, okay. Exactly. So they were beating them up, and so then the story was they went to the O Club afterwards, because that's a big thing in the Air Force, especially for the Friday night O Club sort of thing, right? Sure. And so they went to the O Club, and there was a dice game that broke out there. We beat them up there. My squadron beat them up there too. And this one guy, like fairly senior Air Force officer in the squadron, was like, one of our guys was just like hammered drunk, just like really like it was time for him to leave, and the guy was starting to be. So the guy was like, oh, maybe you should play a little nicer or something like this. And our guy, like, literally says, "You want to get paid?" And he, like, grabbed a handful of cash out of his pile and threw it at him. They dragged him out of the bar. It was just like, we were not invited back for a little while just because
Oh, come on. That's all good fun.
Right. It was good. 3 years later, we ended up coming back right before I left the squadron, and same sort of thing. Did really well in the visual arena. Had our butts kicked at the distance.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do you want to get straight to the story?
Yeah, we kind of
get it straight to the story.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I guess enough sea stories here. Let's talk about a story about the sea.
Yeah. All right. So as we said, last Saturday, U.S. and Israel hit Iran. This week, the world is paying for it at the pump, and potentially a lot more. Oil is in the high 70s in U.S. dollars. Passages in the Strait of Hormuz. There's my Strait joke.
Thank you very much.
Which, this basically has effectively come to a halt. And some analysts say that we should see $100 a barrel if this drags out. So I'm a wind guy, but we used to fly over this part of the world, and you and I both know that this Strait of Hormuz isn't just a shipping lane. It's, some call it the most important 21 miles of water on the planet. So before we get into what's happening, like, in a broader sense, I want to make sure our listeners understand the playing field, because when people hear, oil prices are up, they think about just the gas station, but the actual mechanics and how the conflict in the Persian Gulf, like, actually ends up impacting your wallet. Really, just some people don't connect the dots. I actually mentioned Scott from CNN. Well, Scott Jennings from CNN last week. It's like, he's like, hey, we don't buy Iranian oil anyway. The Chinese do, so it's not going to affect prices at our pump. But Mike, do you want to kick us off on why Scott Jennings was speaking to us from Mars?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack, just like from the jump. The first one is the concept of choke points, which is familiar to people within kind of the naval services, but outside the world may not. A lot of the world's commerce goes by sea, a huge amount of it, and that commerce has to go through certain areas that are referred to as choke points. It may be like the Panama or the Suez canals, or the Bab el-Mandeb, whatever, the southern end of the Red Sea. But the most famous choke point on the planet is the Straits of Hormuz. And the Straits of Hormuz are the entrance into what formerly was known as the Persian Gulf, now known, at least in the U.S., as the Arabian Gulf. And it is a kind of a winding path that goes from the Indian Ocean into the Gulf. And it has to go around effectively all Iran. Iran controls it. And U.S. Navy ships for decades have had to be very, very careful about this. It is like potentially the biggest thing that a ship in transit has to do is because like not only are you going through a place with a lot of other ships and you have to avoid like playing bumper cars between ships, but also like you have hostile forces on the shoreline staring at you, oftentimes operating in the same area trying to fuck your world up. There's been a whole bunch of history of the U.S. Shooting down an Iranian airliner in the 80s, and the Iranians like targeting and effectively destroying an American warship. It has been the central part of like entering the Gulf for decades and decades, and so it is a strategic advantage of the Iranians in order to be able to control that water space and to be able to shoot at it from their own shore. There's even some islands in there that they have to be paying attention to. So it's a big deal. It's also a big deal because something like a fifth of the world's oil passes through that. Some of the largest oil reserves in the world, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, most of their, if not all of their port facilities that are able to get that oil out go into the Gulf and therefore go through the Straits of Hormuz. And so that the whole world's oil markets are tied to what goes through this chunk of water.
Yeah. So this ties back to what I said last week, what Scott Jennings got wrong, which is it doesn't matter that, oil is a global commodity, right? You've heard probably terms West Texas Intermediate and Brent crude. First of all, those are basically, you don't have to worry about that. Those fill the global market. And if oil doesn't fly, as you said, a fifth, 20% of the world's oil goes through the Straits of Hormuz. If that gets cut off, it doesn't matter that Russia and China are buying a lot of oil from Iran. That means that they're going to have to go get that oil somewhere else. And that means that it affects global prices. So it can affect prices at home. Even though, like, actually, the U.S. gets most of its imported oil from Canada and places that are closer to home, right? But it still affects our prices if Iran, as you said, it's Iran, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and Qatar all have to get their oil out through the Straits of Hormuz.
Yeah. There is some specifics, and that's why they talk about Brent crude versus West Texas and all the rest. Like, as you go through the distillation process, like certain refineries can refine it, different types of crude in different ways. Like the stuff coming out of Canada is really heavy, it tends towards more like asphalt, things like that. But by and large, because these are commodities, interchangeable products, something that affects the market someplace affects the market kind of everywhere. And just to that point, that if you're trying to buy, if you were buying from the United States now, the price of oil is going to go up for American producers. Like, this is great for American oil because the price, and maybe that's the whole point. But this is great for American producers because they're still producing, and this will actually probably turn on more production in the United States, both in the short term and in the longer term, because of the instability in the oil markets and the increased cost of delivery associated with this. It's just kind of basic supply demand curves that we all learned about like in high school.
Yeah. All right. So as soon as this war kicked off, traffic dropped by about 80% immediately. And not because of a blockade. Like, Iran didn't stop these tankers from flowing through, but because those ships that pass through have insurance, and no insurance company on earth is going to cover a tanker that's sort of risks it, if you will. Now, interestingly, Trump actually came out and said, he's like, we'll pay the insurance. You guys should just keep going. That didn't work. Any guess as to why?
Yeah, I mean, like, because there's like lives and material at stake too, right? Like, it's not just like, oh, we'll let the Iranians like sink this ship and at least we'll cover it in insurance. Like, you're also responsible for the sailors on board your ships that are passing that. And by the way, ships aren't built overnight. Like, it's not like a 1-for-1, like, I'll just, have AI generate me a new ship. You don't 3D print these things. So of course people aren't going to want to do that. And then also, like, by the way, like, how reliable is the American president's word? How reliable is, the insurance market that he's backstopping? Like, it's not reliable. So, like, why would you bank on that? You better have that money in your pocket before you think about making that transit right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, so let's talk some numbers. So oil had already risen 17% this year before this Iran conflict. Since Saturday, they're up another 7.5%, 8%. So AAA, they do gas index in the United States. They put out a report that said that gas prices rose 11 cents overnight on Monday. And what does, $90 or $100 oil do to the political equation is the question here. Like, Trump ran on bringing oil prices down, gas prices down. Gas prices have been down generally. What does this suggest? I mean, is this gonna actually be a political issue, you think?
So it really depends on how long this goes on for. I think at a certain point, the price, all that bottled up oil in the Gulf, there's going to be like one tanker that decides to go Leroy Jenkins on this and decides to make a run.
Leroy Jenkins.
Leroy. Anyways, so, and so that will, if they can make it through safely, you'll probably see, flow start to kind of pick back up. If it continues to go on for a while, I would expect this to do a couple things. One is that there's a lot of taps that are available in the United States that don't turn on. Like, so an oil producer may drill a well, but if the price of oil is too high, they don't run it because it's too expensive. It's not valuable enough to produce. So there will be some market corrections associated with that, just naturally on like pent up supply that's only available when it's $100 a barrel. If it keeps going on for a while, that may start to prompt more upstream oil suppliers to get back into drilling more wells. That has been kind of slowed down here relatively recently. A lot of the most cost-effective stuff has been drilled at this point. And so, okay, maybe there's a case to be made for expanding capacity in more expensive production areas. So, if that goes on for a long time, you're going to start seeing a boom in Texas and Dakotas and all the places, Pennsylvania, all the places where there's shale oil, and people can get, pretty pumped up about that stuff. But the other component of it is I was watching a little bit the other day and talking about like that the number one kind of tax on Americans in a lot of ways is their energy. And so, people make a lot about like the cost of oil in California or Washington or Massachusetts or something like that. But there's the cost of energy relative to the income level. And it actually tends to be the poorer states, actually the red states that back Trump, that where people spend a lot more, even though the energy is quote unquote cheaper, they make so much less money on average that it's a higher percentage of their income. And so it affects those people most directly. Like that, there's the reason the red states, if you want to kind of boil it down into a political reductivism, like there's a reason that those are the places that tend to squawk the most about energy consumption or energy prices. So if this goes on for a long time at kind of a high price, which is probably why Trump is working on, on trying to unbottle this because of the insurance and like really heavily targeting the Iranian Navy because they want to, like they sank a ship out in the Indian Ocean, near India, for goodness sakes. Like that's probably like it's the soft underbelly from a political standpoint because these are his people, and they're the ones that are going to be feeling the effects most acutely.
Yeah. Well, so OPEC announced that production is going to increase 200,000 barrels a day. They're doing that because they want to keep prices down. And if you're not familiar with OPEC, it's been around since the 70s. They began essentially like the theory goes here that they want to control oil prices because they want to keep up. Well, OPEC is the alliance of oil producing countries. This is Saudi Arabia and most of the Middle Eastern producers.
Venezuela too.
Venezuela.
The United States actually now controls essentially some of the OPEC supply.
It's super interesting. Well, so it's a cartel and they can influence the price of oil. They want to keep oil cheap because if it's too expensive, then people find alternatives. electric vehicles, etc. And so they, generally speaking, they want it to be high enough to make up good profit, but not so high that people find alternatives. In this case, they sort of immediately announced a big production increase, except that it has no impact because all of the countries that are meaningfully contributing to that 200,000 barrel a day increase sit behind the Straits of Hormuz.
Yeah, it's all bottled up. So it's going to be a great time to be an American producer in the short term.
Well, you mentioned that. So who are the winners here? Like, talk to me about, like, so clearly the oil producers in the U.S. because of some of what you just said. Who else wins?
Yeah, there's a lot to kind of think about here. So one is probably strengthens Vladimir Putin. They're also a big oil and gas producer, and their primary market had been to China right now. China's primary supplier had been Iran. And so, because there's a contiguous land border between Russia and China, like he now has the ability to export. Higher prices for that are probably going to mean that he can weather the war in Ukraine a little bit longer. Which is ironic because this probably was brought about because Putin was tied up in Ukraine rather than able to come back up one of his allies in the form of Iran.
This one actually makes me more mad than just about anything else. Is that, but I've said this so many times. Like, Ukraine is the domino, and we've taken our eye off the ball. As I said a couple of weeks ago, Europe has not. Ukraine is still very clearly the center of their universe. But this strengthens Putin's hand is just maddening. It's just...
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, if you really want to play the real politic, which is like what Stephen Miller is doing here, if you care nothing about the people of all the places that are being here, he wants Putin to be ground to dust in the Ukraine. He doesn't care how many Ukrainians die in the process or how long it takes. The longer Putin's tied up in Ukraine, the better it is for his ability to go gallivanting the world, deposing and killing, foreign leaders. So Stephen Miller probably wins. I would say here, he seems to be the only one inside of the White House that seems to have been advocating for this. So I'm not sure what's going to go on with that.
All right. So Russia wins, U.S. producers win, and the sort of argument for American energy independence, which we've largely achieved. Who else?
I think that it's defense stocks are going to be one of them, and I also think sustainability related companies are going to be another. So on the defense stock sort of thing, which is the number one consumer of energy on the planet is the United States military as a single organization, specifically the United States Air Force, if you were to pick a sub-entity. Almost all that energy is in the form of petroleum. So but the U.S. taxpayer seems to be footing the bill for all of that. So there we go. But outside of that, the U.S. taxpayer is also footing the bill for a lot of we just had 3 F-15 shot down. We are going to be shooting a ton of missiles, like a holy cow ton of missiles. Iran has still a really pent up supply of ballistic missiles that they're going to be launching at everybody throughout the Gulf areas. They've already kind of indicated they have a bunch of drones as well. The way that we shoot those downs is with surface-to-air missiles, whether they're land-based in the Patriot form or if they're, sea-based in SM-2s or 6s. Those things aren't cheap. And we don't have a huge stockpile of them. So there's a couple things that are going to happen there. One is that we're going to be expending a bunch of them. Two is we're going to be screaming at the defense contractors to build as many as they can as fast as they can. Which is, of course, going to be, twice the price as what it normally would be.
So that point right there brings me to something that has come up in basically every defense innovation conference I've been at over the last 18 to 24 months, which is it is unsustainable to shoot down a $20,000 drone with $1 million missile.
Yeah. And you can build a $20,000 drone a lot faster, and you can build $1 million missile too.
That's what we're doing. To be clear, that's what we're doing right now in Iran.
That's right. So maybe we start having fighter jets on cap, to go do, gunnery exercises on drones, because drones are pretty obvious to track. Like, it's just like,
that sounds fun.
It could be kind of fun, kind of a Mariana's turkey shoot sort of thing, but like, chasing a drone down, shoot it down, there's a limit on how much ammo a Hornet can carry. So it's still expensive, but not as expensive as lobbing, missiles at it. But, if you're lobbing air-to-air missiles, we have a limited supply of those too. So anyways.
I don't think the F-35 has a gun though. So this is
it
just
has a gun pod.
Mission.
It has a gun pod that they can attach to it for the air-to-surface mission.
Check.
So I don't know. Either way, we're going to be shooting a bunch of shit, and the defense industry is going to be doing that. Also, the defense tech stocks, defense tech, like in the innovation, like, because this is going to be showing a huge capabilities gap in our facility, that we are already familiar with, but is just going to be, that point's going to be driven home and on. So, like, if you're Anduril or whoever, you're going to, like, life's good for you right now. There's going to be so much money flowing into those companies right now.
Yeah. The other is the energy transition argument. You kind of mentioned this. I am less, like, from a policy perspective, will it drive market adoption of more solar and wind and geothermal? Yeah, maybe. I mean, demand for energy is up. If prices of petroleum products are up, you sort of naturally seek. This is what OPEC has been fighting against for so long. So I think that's possible. I don't know. Do you see that differently?
I think that's almost certainly the case. Like, we were already thinking about, like, approaching peak oil demand soon. Like I said, there's different. I've said on the previous podcasts, like, there's different interpretations of, like, what's going on right now. But, like, there are some, including the IEA, that are thinking that we're in the next couple of years for peak oil demand. And so, historically, one of the advantages of oil is that it's a fairly sticky market, right? Like, that it's hard to switch away from oil in a lot of ways. But there are now, like, competing and real alternatives associated with this stuff. You can, drive an electric vehicle. You can have heat pumps. You can have, like, all the things that are happening for that. And it reminds me a little bit about like the tariffs and how they affected soybeans. So U.S. soybean producers right now are just getting smashed in the face. Their lives are pretty miserable, and it's because our number one export for soybeans was China, and China was using it to feed their domestic, animal, facilities, etc. So the tariffs made it so that China was like, screw this, and they went and they signed deals with Brazil and Argentina. So that is now the supplier. Like, those industries were relatively nascent for soybeans in those two countries, but now that they have, like, a long-term demand signal, it is highly unlikely that the United States will ever regain the market share of soybeans that it had before. The same sort of thing is here. It's like, once you get past switching costs and, like, you've reduced the barrier for switching, like, that market's permanently lost. I will never own another gas car. Like, I have 2 EVs. I will never own another gas car. I'm not buying gas from you ever again. Right? I have, like, natural gas still going into my house, but, like, that's a pretty low value product. And, that's not the reason. And by the way, you can't really ship that internationally anyways very easily, because there's so much loss associated with the transmission of it. So this is actually probably a good news story in the long term for renewable energy and for the adoption of electric vehicles. The big problem there is that makes who the final winner of this all is China. They have had a large enough strategic oil reserve that they're going to withstand this. They have access to other markets, and they've been decarbonizing their economy, and they are the producers for the planet of electric vehicles and solar power. And this is only going to drive demand more for those products.
Yeah, no, they import most of their petroleum products, but they have overinvested in production of batteries, solar, wind, so that it's basically a big infrastructure project for them. So they built just gigawatts. And it's just like, if you haven't looked up online what a big solar field in China looks like, you should look at that, because it's China scale, which is massive and et cetera. Well, so just to wrap up here, I think from a couple of last thoughts of really what this boils down to is if this lasts a couple of weeks, it's a blip, and then we get back to shipping oil around the world and it's not a big deal. But I think part of what I heard out of the discussion today was just like, if this drags on, it really will drive oil prices up. And then some of what we're talking about with pushing pressure on clean technologies, inflation, gas prices, and then therefore sort of political outcomes all comes to pass. So if this is a 2-week war, no problem. But I don't think that's what we're talking about here.
I don't think we are either, because, let's think of the cards that Iran has to play here, right? We're torpedoing their ships, so the first combat patrol for a submarine since World War II associated with that. We are destroying their naval infrastructure. Effectively, that seems to be the goal of the whole thing is like, how can we bring Ezra Klein, I was listening to a podcast this morning, is describing it as head-on pike diplomacy. Which is like how to, like we're actually not trying to do regime change. We're just trying to scare the hell out of them so that they come to bear. But as we talked about on the last podcast, is that these guys have the Iranians have a really deep bench by design, and this is not Venezuela where you depose the top and like it'll all crumble, right? So, and they also have a lot of underground storage for drones and for ballistic missiles. And so the card that they have to play right now is to punish the Gulf states that are providing basing operations and to continue to plug up the Straits of Hormuz. And they can do that pretty inexpensively because, again, all it takes is just one oil tanker being hit in the Straits of Hormuz before all of them say, fuck it, we're not doing it, no matter the insurance, right? So that's their play. And so the U.S. is going to have to spend a lot of time playing whack-a-mole. So I think this is probably going to stick for a bit. And I think all the things that we talked about are going to happen there. In the longer term, though, eventually the oil is going to get out, right? That'll eventually happen. And there's this potential sort of thing that with renewable energy, because it's a technology and the more you deploy it, the cheaper it gets, rather than a commodity where the more you consume it, the more expensive it gets, where you're not going to be able to, and if you hit peak oil demand, like energy is going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, right? And so there's this component of like, it won't matter if gas goes to $3 or $2 or even a fucking buck. Like if it's cheaper to produce somewhere else and people have already switched, they'll just keep doing that, right? And so there is a potential world here, for me to be this techno-optimist, where energy, tends towards free. It'll never get there, but like it'll that's the direction it'll go. Just like, in the 90s, the Google would talk about information wants to be free, and we're kind of at that point now where information is free. There's a world where energy wants to be free. And I think we may, Trump unintentionally may have actually hastened that world if he can, move us towards peak oil demand.
All right, let's move on to the reader mailbag. We're going to highlight a comment here from Matt Gibson, who is from Australia. I'm not going to read the entire comment because it was actually pretty lengthy, but I took out the sort of key chunk here. If you want to write to us, our email is hardpoints.show@gmail.com. Matt Gibson writes, I'd love to root for America, but that country and what it stood for no longer exists. The trust with allies is broken. See the Kurds, the Afghans, and Ukraine for examples of abandonment. And explain why any country would make long-term plans with a country that can elect someone like Trump. Sure, you might make a course correction if you have another election in the future, but the one after that might go back to a MAGA type because eggs are expensive again. I've been assured by too many Americans that Trump didn't win because he ran against a strong black woman. So the egg story must have legs. LOL.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, what's that joke about the guy that's the bridge builder? You know what I'm talking about? There's a guy that goes around and like he says, I built all these bridges, I built this, and we're like, but no, am I known as the bridge builder? No. Apparently, if you fuck one goat, you're known as the goat fucker. And so, it's a coarse way to say, which is trust broken is hard to regain. And that's where the U.S. is right now. And like, this is a known commodity of it. Like, speaking of Iran, Trump broke the Iran nuclear deal. And what he's doing right now is essentially trying to rebuild it, at the point of a sword. So it's hard to regain that. But what I would say is that, America goes through cycles of rebirth. And we had allowed all the infrastructure to age. What we had built following World War II allowed us to kind of lead the world. I think we're going to rebuild it. I remain an optimist. And if you don't trust the United States in the short term, I get it. But I remain a patriot. I'm not giving up on the ship here. We're going to rebuild it. And I am confident that over the next, the rest of my life, that the U.S. will regain that position because we're going to deal with our demons. And it's weird. I've not been this optimistic as I have been. And
you got your positive pants on, man.
I'm feeling good, man. Well, give me some coffee.
Yeah, I'll say this. Trump is. We all know Trump is full of shit in so many things. This is one where he says we're respected in the world. And I just always roll my eyes because I travel enough and I hear stuff like this all the time. And it's just another way that he's full of shit. Some of the stuff he says and he's full of shit, it doesn't do any harm. I just think this one in particular, because I spend so much time overseas, is hard to, it's just a hard pill to swallow because they're laughing at us. Often people laugh in my face and this LOL at the end, like this is a written LOL, but like, yeah, it's just, as a proud American, it's a reminder that we got to get our shit together. That's an in-house cleanup project like you just described. So, let's move on to goods, bads, and others. I'll kick it off. My good this week is the SBIR reauthorization. So SBIR is Small Business Innovation Research. It's a program to help small businesses do research. It is not fully authorized yet. Heirloom has benefited from this. The Air Force is using SBIR dollars to do a lot of defense innovation. There's also some problems with the program, and it's been delayed and not reauthorized because people are trying to fix those challenges. But it passed the Senate, still got to pass the House. It's super important to companies like Heirloom, and we are waiting on an award that would be really important. So that is my good that it made it through the Senate.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you, man. I know that's a big deal to y'all.
All right, my bad really is that, as I said, I've been watching the news, and I just, we unpacked the Iran conflict last episode. We talked about it a lot here today. I just think there is what is the one thing we learned from Vietnam? And we said we would never get wrong again when Schwarzkopf came up and talked about the Persian Gulf War. A very clear military objective.
Yeah, the Powell Doctrine.
And then, yeah, what is our objective in Iran? Nobody knows. Nobody has any fucking clue. Nobody can articulate it. You talk to the administration people and ask them that question, you get 6 different answers
from
every
the same
hour.
person. Yeah. Rubio switched answers from one day to the next.
Anyways. Again, I'm a proud American. I so want to be on board and I'm cheering for our team, but I just don't. How do you know if this is a 2-week war or a 6-month war or a 6-year war when you don't know what you're trying to accomplish? We have no idea. And I don't know. It's just really frustrating.
Yeah. We're putting the sons and daughters of America into harm's way, and we're creating a whole lot of tumult. You'd want there to be a good reason, and you'd want to have an exit strategy. We have neither.
Yeah. My other is March Madness is right around the corner, man. Talking about positive pants. It's partially because I have my Razorbacks mug out today. It's because my Razorbacks are actually playing well. And also, it's just a fun time of year. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's a good time. I'm not the biggest basketball fan, but March Madness is one of the times that I tend to tune in. I'm more, excited about spring training for the Orioles there. This is going to be their year. I'm feeling optimistic. So speaking of optimistic, my good this week is I think people are starting to rise up. It always frustrated me over the last, frankly, decade about how everybody was like, well, surely somebody will take care of this or somebody will do something, surely.
Mm-hmm.
And, one by one, all the institutions collapsed because surely somebody else would take responsibility for it. Well, not anymore. People are taking responsibility for this. They're owning it. They're showing up not just to vote, because we're already into the primary season for a lot of folks right now, but like our elected representatives, Marjorie Taylor Greene, like what? Like she's showing up. She's madder than a fucking stepped on snake right now when it comes to this Iran war.
Secret, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, Thomas Massey, the congressman from Kentucky.
I have turned into a Marjorie Taylor Greene fan. I just go.
Everything's
MTJ
being shuffled.
Go.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's being all shuffled up right now. But
totally.
But it used to bother me because like the only people that would stand up here on the Republican side of things were the people that were either retiring or dying. Like you didn't see people that were like active politicians, and you're starting to see that. But more than the politicians, you're seeing people like Minnesota, like got me pumped. Like the fact that the people of Minnesota stood up and they went through and they're still bearing the consequences of that, right? Like there's still 600, I think there are more ICE agents in Minneapolis still than there are police officers, right? Like they outnumber the Minneapolis police force, I believe. But nonetheless, and the people of Minneapolis, like they're because so many of them lost so much income because they were taking care of their neighbors or hiding in their house, like they're facing like a rent problem right now where people may be running into evictions. But they stood up, they bore the cost, they took care of their neighbors. And that just makes me more optimistic than I've been in a long time about the direction of this country. And that's why I say, like, to my Australian friend, like, we're coming back. Give us some time, learn to trust the right members of the U.S. public and keep building up our hand to play so that way we can keep playing it. My bad this week is extended family member. I'm heading off to Boise tomorrow morning in order to it was a pre-planned visit, but my great aunt fell and broke a bone, and she's in like in a memory care unit, and I don't want to go into too much details other than to say that like this is upsetting to both her and to my great uncle and to like the extended family, and just be grateful for your health. Right. That you have a limited number of days and hours and minutes on this earth. And so, if you got your health, take advantage of it. Go enjoy it because you never kind of know when that goes away.
Yeah.
And then my other this week is AI again. So
yeah. What is it this time, Mike?
So Acclimate, part of what we do is we create software, right? And so you can interact with our software through a web application, et cetera. And there's, we're making the transition from the old SaaS model of like, here's the buttons you can click and to us being able to do it. And so as we've been experimenting around with that, like one of my teammates, there's a Google Chrome extension for Claude.
For Claude, yeah.
Yeah. And he told it what he needed to do. And then like we have like some people that help with it, like the clicking through, and Claude started interacting with our web app within the Chrome window and just started running away with it. Like it was so fast. And like, we're turning that into, we're going to take that out of like the Chrome environment, move it back into the data, into the coding environment. And that just kind of blows my mind. And it makes me like really excited about the opportunities that are coming up here, but also like really nervous because up until now, I thought like the last couple of weeks, like I thought the AI thing was mostly hype. Nope, it is not hype. And it makes me think that it is going to be a bloodbath when it comes to the labor market, especially for entry-level folks. And as a father, I think about that a lot right now. So I'm trying to think through a little bit about like, what does this mean for me professionally, for my business opportunities? What does this mean personally, as a father? What do I want to do with the rest of my life? It is a huge, like, I've got to keep my eye on this thing, and it may be my permanent other to be tracking on. I'll try not to do that because it doesn't make for very interesting podcast. But like, man, if you're not paying attention to AI, you need to hurry up.
Yeah, I concur with that. I think it's uncomfortable because it takes a little bit of it takes effort to like break yourself out of the current habit pattern and try to figure out, that Claude Chrome extension. There are a bunch of agents out there that can do stuff for you. I think to be on the leading edge of figuring out all that stuff that you just mentioned about being a dad, et cetera, you have to be in the weeds, understanding the capability as it comes out. Just be on the leading edge of it the best you can. And then just spend time thinking all of that through. What does the future look like? We don't know, but the only way you're going to know is if you engage with the tools.
Yeah, 100%. I was listening to a podcast where Ezra Klein was interviewing Jack Clark, who leads the coding for Claude, et cetera. And in that podcast, he described, he was asked how much of the code for Anthropic is written by its own AI. And he said easily over 50%. And he said within the next year, it could be 99%. And like, we are rushing headlong towards the singularity. So the whole world is, the world, we are being shot out of a cannon right now. So yeah. Anyways,
man, we're at time. We're over time.
Yeah, too much. So anyways, that's it for this episode of Hardpoints. Thanks for listening and for being part of the conversation around energy, national security, and the startup economy. If you have a quick question or comment about today's show, please send us an email and we just might feature it on a future episode. As Neal mentioned, the email is hardpoints.show@gmail.com. Again, that's hardpoints with an s.show@gmail.com. In addition, make sure to follow us where you get your podcast, share it on social media, or, of course, send it to somebody that might appreciate this. Thanks for joining us. Hardpoints is brought to you by the Valor Media Network. See you next time.